Thank you for listening to Organic News here on Awake Radio, where we try to give you news that is organic. Welcome to this Tuesday evening of Organic News. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will have with us a really great guest, Kit Gruelle. Amy Goodman did a really great interview with her. Her documentary, Private Violence, was at the Sundance Film Festival about a month or so ago. And Private Violence tackles the myths and misconceptions about domestic violence that make the world a dangerous place for 1 in 4 women and their families. 35 years into the battered women's movement, it's time to start asking different questions and posing new solutions. A feature-length documentary from 2013 is at the heart of the project's mission. I also wanted to play, there's a little bit of Kit Gruelle with Amy Goodman. I am just trying to look it up. When she was on, and here is a little bit of that interview.
Yes, this is Democracy Now!, the War and Peace Report. We are in Park City, Utah at the Sundance Film Festival following the documentary track dealing with the critical issues of the day.
It's believed a Linden police officer shot and killed his entire family. Today, 5 people were found dead in the Spanish Fork home, including the officer and his 2 children, just 5 and 7 years old.
Authorities say Linden police officer Joshua Boren shot and killed his mother-in-law, wife, and 2 young children before turning the gun on himself.
That's actually not a clip from a documentary. It happened last week here in Utah as the Sundance Film Festival got underway. Back home in New York City, a 21-year-old woman and her 2 daughters, ages 2 and 1, were found stabbed to death over the weekend. The victim's husband has been arrested in Texas. Police had reportedly investigated 2 incidents of domestic violence at their home this year. The list of such tragedies is long, but they're often not named for what they are, part of an epidemic of intimate partner violence. In fact, there's a documentary here at Sundance that deals with that very issue. It's called Private Violence, and it highlights the struggles of survivors and the advocates who support them. Set in North Carolina and directed by Cynthia Hill, the film follows advocate Kit Gruelle, who is herself a domestic violence survivor. This is a trailer, a warning that this is footage that's disturbing.
I do this work because I survived a really violent relationship, and it took me getting into this work and understanding it to really see that it's just so widespread.
This last time, he almost killed me in front of my daughter.
But what happened to you shouldn't happen to anybody ever.
I know that. That's why I'm here.
What do your parents have to say about it?
Why didn't you just leave?
Did he ever threaten to kill you?
Yeah, lots of times.
She is still living, correct?
She's still alive. The local prosecutor, he declined to prosecute because he said she should have tried to get away from him. If he was convicted only of misdemeanor assault on a female, what would he be looking at as far as time?
The most he could receive is 150 days in jail.
The daughter and Deanna were back in the cab part of the truck. He just started beating on her.
Martina asked him over and over, why are you doing it? Why are you hurting my mama?
Once he got back to North Carolina, he was interviewed by law enforcement and admitted to beating her so badly that he almost broke his fingers.
As an advocate, there were so many injustices that I felt like happened with her. Martina was removed from Deanna. That really angered me.
What was it like when they came and took Martina?
It destroyed me. She still asks me why I gave her away.
So she remembers it. Our criminal justice system requires that she be beaten enough to satisfy the system. And by the time it gets to that point, she's already been so worn down psychologically and physically and emotionally. You know, the courts have told her that she doesn't have value, and her partners told her that she doesn't have value. Perhaps family and friends have done that through their actions with her. Why don't you just leave him? Why are you staying with him? That's when it's really time for advocates to really step up. Luckily, the feds picked up the case, and it's going to be prosecuted under the Federal Violence Against Women Act. If he doesn't go to prison, he will turn around immediately and start to hurt women again.
If we weren't going to do anything, then maybe nothing was going to be done, and something had to be done.
I'm not going to let him get away with what he done to me, my daughters. Nobody should get away with this. Nobody.
I'm always so astonished and moved at the people who want to come into this movement and do this work, because it's not easy work. It can be heartbreaking and frustrating, but it can also be unbelievably uplifting.
So that was a bit of Kit Gruelle's story on Democracy Now! So we are back. We just had to resolve a little bit of a Skype technical difficulty. So we're just talking with Kit via her phone. So Kit, I just played a clip of your interview on Democracy Now! And the thing that just really stood out just before I ended it was when you said that she had to be beaten enough to satisfy the system.
Right.
I thought that was really like, an incredibly powerful thing to say. And I mean, and it just blows. I mean, it kind of, I felt like I got punched in the face when you said it, like, because it's so like mind-boggling. Exactly. She had to be beaten enough to satisfy the system.
Right. Well, it's sad but true, and it's true all over the country. I was just communicating with a friend in Iowa last night, and he sent me an article about a young woman who, if I'm not mistaken, was stabbed and cut numerous times, including having her throat cut. And my friend told me that the offender is looking at 2 years in jail at the most. And I think that it's one of the things about domestic violence that people just fail to understand is how our courts treat crimes against women and children as red-headed stepchildren crimes that are just insignificant. And the problem is that battered women oftentimes are able to predict with stunning clarity exactly what's going to happen. We see it in orders of protection that are issued where she writes that, he says he's going to shoot me, he says he's going to run me over with a car or whatever, and when he violates the protective order, the courts tend to just shrug their shoulders and say, oh, well, this is just a little civil violation, no big deal, and then she winds up dead. And so for those of us who are advocates who have learned over the years to really listen to battered women and to honor what they're saying, we feel like we'd like for everyone else in the system also to treat battered women like the experts that they are.
I mean, they're the ones that are there. I mean, I know a bit about this subject, firsthand. I mean, I grew up with domestic violence and abuse, and I used to try to tell people all the time, like, how it was affecting me. And right, like, the attitude of people is just, oh, it's like no big deal. Oh, get over it. I mean, no one actually just listens and takes stuff and gives things the weight that it deserves. They take these incredibly serious, situations, and they meet it with like something, such a light attitude. Like they don't meet it with the weight that it deserves.
Well, and the other thing, too, is like, with that comment that I made about women have to be beaten enough to satisfy the system. An example is here in North Carolina, we have a charge that's commonly used in domestic violence cases called misdemeanor assault with a deadly weapon. So in my state, a woman can be shot or stabbed by her husband or boyfriend, and unless it involves a very serious or life-threatening injury, more likely than not it's going to be charged as a misdemeanor. And a misdemeanor means at most 150 days in jail if it's the second offense. And so, yeah, what we see and what we understand is that women suffer these, these beatings, and then also the other tactics that abusers use, like coercion and intimidation, and we just as a matter of course diminish their experiences, which means we're diminishing the value of their lives. And I just don't think, I've never met a woman yet that I think we can afford to lose.
That's exactly right. It's when I hear you talk and I'm watching the video, because I watch like so many videos about we do this to so many people, like just across the world. Like we just, they drop drones on people. I mean, it's almost like an epidemic, this sort of, good old boys club that like, like the good old boys can't do anything wrong. And they're all on each other's side when they kill people. I mean, they just, shot and killed this poor homeless guy in New Mexico. And the cops, the mayor was the only one that said that how the cops handled it was wrong. But the police chief or something was like, oh, they did everything by the book. It's like they just stick together like this good old boys club. I don't know what else to call it.
Well, I think that one of the things I want to be careful about is and I know that this is not your intention to paint everybody with one brush, but I actually work with law enforcement in California. We do a class. It's the only class of its kind in the country, and it's specifically for hostage negotiators, because what most people don't realize is that domestic violence is the root cause for approximately 70 to 80% of all hostage-taking incidents every year in this country. And so what we do with this 3-day class in California is we talk with these negotiators about how different it is when a man is in a bank with a bag of money and he wants a helicopter ride to Mexico versus a man who has been served with an order of protection and his wife or girlfriend has said stay away, and he is of the mindset, nobody's going to tell me to stay away. This is my house, my property. You're my wife, or you're my girlfriend, and these are my kids. And it's very much a crime. It's like a property crime. And so these abusers go over to where she is and break in and barricade in and hold her and the kids hostage. So I have the very distinct pleasure of working with a lot of really wonderful law enforcement officers who want to negotiate things peacefully, who really want to do the right thing, and who are really good people. But the sad truth is that across the country, crimes committed against women and children are still, in many respects and in many jurisdictions, nuisance crimes. And we lose so much to domestic violence that is tangential to the actual direct violence. When kids grow up exposed to violence, they tend to not do well in school. Or what they might choose to do is, rather than continue to live with the violence at home, they might run away from home when they're 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, and then they join gangs, they get involved with substance abuse because they need to self-medicate. Yeah. Young girls become pregnant because some guy comes along and sweet talks her, and then she finds herself back in the same situation that her mom was in. Exactly. So this crime is really, it's what I refer to as the petri dish of all other, criminal conduct that we deal with, because when you talk with people that are serving time and really get their story, yeah, a high percentage of them grew up exposed to violence in the home, and so we just have to start taking it more seriously than what we do.
And one point that I just want to make, again, that I hear a lot of people say, they think everything is intellectual. Like they think that, just because you were exposed to violence in your house or whatever, like, oh, you know better, like, not to do it. And they think on an intellectual level that people just, it's kind of like dieting or something, just have willpower. But what they don't understand is that this stuff it's like a program that's downloaded into your computer. It's downloaded into your nervous system when you live, especially at young ages. People, when you're like at your most vulnerable, when you're at your most absorbent, and you're exposed to this violence and you know, people that are supposed to be there for you, they're supposed to be protecting you. I mean, this is your life. I mean, these are the teachers that are, I mean, I try to tell people this stuff all the time. I've been trying to say this to people my whole life. And forget it. I mean, people are just like, they don't want to hear me. Like, they're so sick of hearing it because, I see, like, I blame the people that don't want to hear it, because I just think that a lot of people, because they don't want to have to be inconvenienced and do anything about these things, so their attitude is just, deal with it yourself, get over it, whatever. And I mean, it's just it's really like an ongoing problem on so many levels.
Well, and I think a lot of people don't think that it touches people like them. I've got a very dear friend who was an investigative reporter for the Washington Post, and he said to me, I knew nothing about violence against women until the day I got the phone call that my daughter was dead. And then he went to Massachusetts and really kind of popped the hood and took a hard look at their criminal justice system to understand how it was that this man who was a serial abuser and who was awaiting trial and I think sentencing for assaulting his previous girlfriend and had another restraining order against him was able to walk the streets freely, obtain a gun, and then stalk and kill my friend George's daughter. And I think that that's one of the problems with this crime is that it happens behind closed doors, which is why the name of the film and the outreach project, Private Violence, is so important. We've got to take this crime that occurs behind closed doors in the name of family, in the name of love, and expose it for what it is. Because, I've done this work for a long time, and I feel like that if we can't be safe in our own homes, then where can we be safe? And it should be so fundamental to everyone that when we close the door at night, that we don't have to worry about being harassed, molested, intimidated, coerced, emotionally abused, physically abused, sexually abused. And I believe that if we could manage to work towards that, then that's what would change this planet.
Like there's a lot of talk lately, since the Wall Street crash, there's a lot of talk about debt. But to me, this is the debt that we need to be focusing on, because, right, when you do not have a healthy environment to live in, as a wife, husband, especially a child, you get your body literally goes into a form of debt. Psychological, emotional, spiritual debt. I mean, the family system, right, is supposed to be an environment where you fill up, where you gain wealth, where you accrue more wealth, where you, get stronger and more valuable, not where you go into more of a debt, where you go into a spiritual and psychological bankruptcy, starvation. I mean, right. It's like we live in like this emotional starvation world. Like I can't tell you like all the stuff I did, all the books I read, all the therapy and, physical fitness like really helped me. I mean, I'm single and, I sometimes think that I always will be out of this basic fear. I mean, I just kind of give up at this point that it's having like a healthy relationship with someone where you're actually building and helping to build people. It's like people don't have the skills to interact in a way that actually builds. It's like they just don't know how to do it. And when I was young, I was so compelled to work out and to do fitness. I believe it was instinctual because I was trying to learn how to build. It was the only way that I could think of to help to stop the debt, from myself from being depleted, from losing more of my energy, like stopping the bleeding, and then to try to just build myself up. But, again, I didn't have the skills, my whole life was spent learning, like how to set boundaries, how to stand up for yourself. But the thing is, when you don't have family when you don't have someone,
modeling it for you.
Right, and the resources. It's when we come into this world, we are supposed to come into the world with that emotional bank account already there for us that we can draw on when we need it. And like we live now in this world that's like flipped the other way around, where instead of parents acquiring wealth physically, psychologically, financially, and spiritually, and then having children and passing wealth on to your children, we live in a debt-based society where, parents go into psychological debt, which usually I think is correlated with financial debt, and then pass that on to their children. Like they bring children into the world a lot of times to get from their kids, like to get the love that they never got from their kids. Like rather than giving, they have children to take from.
Well, and the other thing too is one of the myths that needs to be challenged is I hear a lot of people, particularly educated people, say domestic violence only happens with poor, uneducated people or people of color, and that's just a complete, absolute myth. I mean, I've worked with lots and lots and lots of women who are married to very powerful, very wealthy men who they themselves have advanced college degrees, lawyers, doctors, whatever, but they tend to do more to hide it because when the abuser is someone who has a name in the community, has a degree of stature and power in the community, it makes it that much more difficult for women to get any kind of respect from the system because the people outside the home think that they know who he is by virtue of who he is publicly. And so it makes it really difficult for women who are married to doctors or lawyers or pastors or whatever, bank presidents, to reach out for help, because when she does, if he presents himself in a calm, cool, collected demeanor to everyone else, and then he already has this outside reputation, then they just don't believe her. And I've heard such tragic cases from women who should receive just as much support from the system as a woman who is middle class or poorer. And even then, that's oftentimes not saying much. But we have to have an adult conversation about the reality of domestic violence, rather than this mythologized crime that we think we know about, when really it's so multi-layered and complex. And I mean, this is 2014, and we still, as a matter of course, blame the victim for his violence, and it's so frustrating to me because we should be way past this by now.
Right. Like a lot of times, like I feel that our country, and then, even larger, the world has just become just one huge, abusive family system, where the powers that be at the top, they're untouchable, and they can just, kill, assassinate, detain, the most vulnerable of society. And, people, now are just like finally, instead of glorifying these people, seeing them for what they are. But I mean, again, has anybody, been arrested, or jailed, for any of the crimes committed? Any banker, have they gone to jail or been arrested for the crimes? I mean, there's such serious crimes, war crimes, like being committed. So it's kind of, I feel like, very similar to what you're talking about. There's just like all different levels, but it's all like various systems, whether it's the family system or the, financial system, or, just like our larger system, as a whole. And like prosecuting the bully. Like, why is it so hard to hold those responsible? Why is that so hard?
Well, I think we live in a society where what is valued most is power, and when that is, when that's the gold standard, then that's what people aim for, and a lot of people are willing to do whatever they can or need to obtain the power that they think they're entitled to. And as long as we're a culture that values power and control over everything else, over the value of human life, I think I think we're going to continue to see us going down the same road we're going down. But I think that more and more men are starting to stand up and say, I don't want women to think that I'm violent just by virtue of the fact that I'm a man. And so I'm really pleased that over the last, I'd say, 15 years, more and more men have started to form groups that deal with gender-based violence. They're doing some really important work. So I think what historically has been thought of as women's work, which is the battered women's movement, now is being, we're partnering up with more men who truly, consider themselves feminists, and they honor women, they respect women, they like strong women, they're not intimidated by them. And so they're very much a part of trying to change this hypermasculine culture that we've got. And so in some ways I have some degree of hope, but then when I read the papers every day, or I get more notices on email that another woman has been killed trying to leave her abuser, and I read that she did reach out to the system and the system failed her, I find myself wondering just exactly what it's going to take for us to stop, for just everyone to stop. And when she says, if I leave him, he's going to kill me, then to have everyone in the system to respond to her and say, okay, we're going to take you seriously because you're the expert in this, and we're going to do everything we can to place community sanctions on him, to hold him responsible, to say to him, not just to have her say to him, you've got to stop, but to have the community at large say, you can't do this anymore.
Exactly. And I just wanted to say, I think we need to define redefine the definition of power. That right. It's not powerful. You're not powerful to abuse people. That's not the definition of power.
No, that's weakness.
Exactly. Right. What else did I want to say? So tell us your story and what happened to you, and then we'll talk about Susan Stills. She's the one of
I know Susan's case well. Well, I came into this work as a survivor, and I survived because my husband died. He died 34 years ago, and then I left with my boys and moved down to the Chapel Hill area and saw an ad to go through training to become a crisis line volunteer for battered women, and I went through the training. It was just a revelation to me, and I was able to put a lot of the very scattered puzzle pieces of my own life together, because I realized this whole concept of power and control, and was able to connect a lot of dots. And I just found my calling, because it's just so fundamental to me that the person that you're partnered up with is the person that you feel safest with. And so I got involved in the work and wound up running a coordinated community response program in Chatham County, North Carolina, called the Bridges Program. And what the Bridges Program did was we all linked up. I was with the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Program, but I built relationships with local law enforcement, with the DA's office, with mental health, with all the other people that had a place at the prevention table. And because none of us can do this alone, and that's part of what a CCR is recognizing that no one person, no one agency could do this work alone. But if we all work together to send the same message to the victim that what's happening to her is wrong, and then a message to the abuser that what you're doing to her is wrong, then we can start to get some traction. But it takes everybody working together. And then when I started working in California with law enforcement out there, it just dawned on me that I kept hearing the same thing over and over again from people when we talk about what I do for a living. And the first question was, why don't those women just leave? Right. And I would say to them, for one thing, that's a victim blaming question. We don't do it with any other type of criminal behavior. And it's not about what she should or shouldn't do. It's about what he's doing. And it's about the fact that he's making a choice to be violent with her. And we need to stop him. We need to say, no, you can't do this anymore. It doesn't matter that she's your wife or girlfriend. It doesn't give you the right to control, manipulate, and abuse her. And so it really is about a sea change in how we think about this. But I think that the film and the outreach project is going to help illuminate a lot of the aspects of domestic violence that people have never thought about before.
So, right, in response to, why doesn't she just leave? I mean, the whole point is that these people need help. They need, right, assistance, support, from somewhere, from someone else. And I mean, when you're being, constantly like beaten down psychologically and physically, that's just it. I mean, you lose the strength to be able to leave.
Well, but it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be about her leaving. She shouldn't. I mean, we don't do that. Like, we don't say to when a bank gets robbed. Say the bank's been robbed 4 or 5 or 6 times, and law enforcement show up after the robbery, and they dust for fingerprints, and they interview all the people that witnessed the bank robbery. When they're done, they don't go to the bank president and say, "Why'd you keep all that money here? Didn't you know somebody was going to show up with a gun and rob this place?"
Exactly.
But yet we look at women who have been abused and we say to them, okay, now you've been abused. Now what you have to do is you have to leave your home, you have to leave your pets, you have to leave your family, your friends, the kids have to change schools, you have to quit your job, and you have to go hide out in the shelter for a few months. So the message then to the abuser is you can just keep on abusing, and if you can't find her because she's hiding out because she's so afraid of you, then you can just move on to somebody else, and that's what has to change. We have to quit, expecting that she's going to rearrange her life because of his choice to be violent.
Right. And, like the family, the home, I mean, this is supposed to be it. I mean, this is the foundation. So,
right.
I mean, you can't go below the foundation. I mean, then you're like in the basement or,
Well, and what if we, rather than calling shelters, and believe me, I'm a huge fan of shelters for battered women. I've worked in them. I've got a very dear friend who's a shelter director right now, and she does an incredible job with these women. But what if we just changed what we call them and started referring to them as refugee camps?
Right.
For women who are being abused by their husbands or boyfriends, and maybe society would start to understand what we're talking about. Because when we talk about women going to shelter, I think that kind of lets us off the hook because we imagine, that she's going to this warm, nice place, and in many cases that's what it is. But she shouldn't have to run and hide because he is choosing to be violent with her. That's just, that's like 1 + 1 = 18. It's just not. It's not the right math, and so that's part of what we have to address.
I can't help but just believe that all of these illnesses stem from, you mentioned the words hyper-masculine before, which I completely agree that we live in a hyper-masculine society where, right, like just any compassion, nurturing is almost just frowned upon in both sexes a lot of the times. And there's this epidemic of, just like completely looking down upon any, like, it's not even weakness, it's just normal and healthy, caring, or, I just feel that capitalism, crony capitalism, hyper capitalism has created this, I call it climate shift, where, normal healthy feelings, like normal healthy, just wherever you are in life, like you can be like a normal healthy person, but because hypercapitalism needs to make more business, and we need money, so it's digging into people's natural processes of growth and turning it into something abnormal when it's really normal, and it's just creating this shift.
Right.
So people are not able to like grow and develop normally and be at your natural normal place of development, without some bully coming along and screwing that up. And so it's like you can't just be where you are. Like you have to be stronger. Like you have to be, just unnatural in order to survive, which it just like, it makes no sense. It's this crazy assault on the natural world and natural processes.
Well, I think that I've raised two sons and a daughter, and I wanted to raise my boys to be whole human being adults when they grew up, and that means that when I wanted them to have access to the sides of themselves that are typically considered the feminine sides or the feminine traits and characteristics. And my oldest son now has 3 kids, 2 daughters and a son, and he's such a great dad. He's so loving. He's a great, big, strong guy. But he's also got the capacity and is unafraid to be tender and gentle with his children. And I think that his kids are going to grow up to be much more fully developed people as a result. And I feel very, very happy and privileged to know a lot of men that I consider to be whole human beings, not just the stereotype of what an American man is supposed to be. And I feel bad for any man who allows himself to be pigeonholed into one particular set of rules and regulations, at the cost of really living a more complete life. My husband, who passed away, there was a time when he was strangling me, and I remember looking into his eyes, and he had been in the Marine Corps, had been to Vietnam, and as I was looking into his eyes, there was just this intense, I don't know, it was just this darkness, and it looked to me like this complex concoction of rage and fear and pain and just all these things. And I think it's just a shame on us for not allowing men to be more fully developed as human beings.
Exactly. Like, what you were just describing, this cocktail of emotions that were going on when you were looking into your husband's eyes, like that is what is so sad, really, is that people are trapped, like in their own bodies, like they're trapped, like who he really is or something is it sounds like he's just trapped inside of there, and through conditioning, people, they're just functioning on, right, the conditioning and how they were, just trained to be in life rather than being able to express who they really are. And I really believe that mentality is going to destroy our world. That you got, people say to me all the time, like, you're too sensitive. You got to be tough, as if like, tough runs out, you got to plug yourself in sometimes. You got to, let yourself, feel, soft, tender feelings sometimes. And I really,
I think about if I was a man and someone that was near and dear to me died, I wouldn't want to not be able to express the emotion of sadness and sorrow and grief in a way that was whole and humane, just by virtue of the fact that I happen to be a man. I wouldn't want society to be dictating to me what emotion I should be feeling. And so I just know for my sons and guys that I've known over the years, some of whom are former abusers, once they get the chance to sort of have fuller access to the multiple aspects of their lives and their emotions and that sort of thing, they find themselves much happier people because they're no longer boxed in.
I've actually thought about this, because I always think about nature and how we're just completely messing it up. And right, the natural process inside of people too, I think we're messing up. But I think, like the BP oil spill, for example, with the oil being all over the water and all over the birds, covered with the oil, and the fish that, although the wildlife that got destroyed down there. What are we going to do? Like, say to nature, like, oh, get over it, or, oh, nature, toughen up, like, you shouldn't be affected by this. So, if we can't just take like this constant abuse, I just think it's insane, like where people have gone. on so many levels is just this, right, like hypermasculinity, like you said.
Right.
So I just wanted to move on to Susan Still, who's depicted in your documentary Private Violence. And who is she?
Oh, no, Susan's not in the film. Susan lives in New York, but she's not in the film. The woman whose story is largely featured in the film is a woman named Deanna Walters.
Oh, okay.
So do you want to talk about Deanna?
Yeah, sure.
Well, Deanna was living in Ashe County, North Carolina, and was married to a man who was a serial abuser, and she was doing what so many women who live with abusers try to do. She tried to get away from him, and he kidnapped her and their daughter, and put them in an 18-wheeler, had his cousin drive, and drove them out of North Carolina and across the country. And beat her for 6 days, and just beat her without mercy, like she was a man. And the truck was stopped. They went from North Carolina to California, halfway back, and the truck was stopped in Oklahoma. And Deanna got out of the truck looking, it was just hideous, the things that Robbie had done to her. And the nurse at the hospital took some photographs, and a police officer wrote a report, and then she and Martina were brought back to North Carolina, and even with Deanna beaten as badly as she was, when they went to see the local prosecutor, he basically said to Deanna, "Why didn't you try to run?" Mm-hmm. And she didn't try to run for a whole bunch of really good reasons. Robbie threatened to kill her, to hurt Martina. She didn't know where she was. She didn't have any money. He smashed her with a Maglite flashlight in her legs, I think, partially to disable her, and repeatedly threatened to kill her. And so when she came back to North Carolina, even as badly as she'd been beaten, the local prosecutor was prepared to charge him with 1 count of misdemeanor assault on a female. And so Robbie would have done 150 days in jail, but instead, Deanna's advocate, Stacey Cox, thought that because he'd taken her across state lines, it disqualified as a federal case. And so she started calling the FBI, and it took about 9 months, but the FBI finally came and took a look at the case, and Robbie was placed in federal custody and tried in federal court and sentenced to 21 years in prison. So part of what's so astonishing about it is really how lucky Deanna got that this case was tried in federal court, because if this would have been left up to the state of North Carolina, Robbie would have served a very short sentence, and I believe that he would have killed her by now. Mm-hmm. So it just highlights the difference between how states respond to domestic violence and what happens when the feds get involved. And Deanna now is in school, and she's got a chance to live, a violence-free life and raise her daughter in a safe home. And it's quite a remarkable story.
How do the women overcome the battering, the emotional battering?
Well, it takes having people in their lives to support them and believe in them and tell them that they're not who they've been told they are, that they're good and they're competent and they're capable, and that they, that their lives have value. Because when the person who claims to love you is also telling you through words and deeds that that you're useless, that you can't get anything right, that you can't do this, you can't do that. I mean, that has a profound effect on women. And one of the things that I love about being an advocate is sitting with a woman and listening to her talk and pointing out to her her strengths and pointing out to her the things that I hear in her that indicate to me that she's bright, that she's capable, that there's no reason why she should ever think anything less of herself. And then we get to we're what I call the long distance runners. We get to be with them throughout, however long the process takes for them. And so it's one of the things that I love about being an advocate is to have the privilege really of being with her as she starts that new walk through a world of nonviolence.
It's like growing up for the first time, and being able to, do what you've always wanted to do. How old?
Right.
how is she doing now, Diana Walters?
She's doing well. She's finishing up at Appalachian State, and then she wants to go into social work of some kind. She's also kind of interested in criminology, but she's very bright, and it's just a pleasure now to see her start to to step up and out, and to understand that she is bright and capable. And Martina, their daughter's doing really well, and this for for us as advocates is what it's all about. Just I don't know. It's just really, really wonderful work, and I wanted to. I didn't know if you had seen this particular statistic, but there was a fabulous article in the New Yorker about domestic violence last summer, and there's a piece in here that I think is really important for people to understand, because we think it's this thing that only happens a little bit, and it happens a long ways away from here. So this is a quote from this article. It was written by Rachel Snyder. The name of the article is A Raised Hand. I want to read this one. Between 2000 and 2006, 3,200 American soldiers were killed. During that period, domestic homicide in the United States claimed 10,600 lives. So there were more people that died in the United States of America in a 6-year period, 3 times as many, because of domestic violence, and were killed on battlefields overseas, and it's just a stunning statistic to me.
So, why does this happen? Do you think? Like, what creates these situations of domestic violence?
It goes back to it's a number of things. It's the desire for power and control. It's the sense of entitlement that abusers often have. They see women as subordinate to them, and that it's their job to control and correct them. And then it's also an issue of American society, and it's global too. It's not just us. I mean, it's terrible everywhere. But I've spent a fair amount of time with Gloria Steinem, and she refers to domestic violence crimes as male supremacist crimes. And I think that's precisely what they are. When men believe that they're superior to women, and they're prepared to use whatever tool or tactic they feel like they need to enforce and maintain that sense of supremacy. That's why we're in the situation that we're in. And then when that becomes acute and toxic, and families this becomes normalized for them, and kids get a steady diet of violence. I mean, you can see why we're kind of in the place that we are. We just have to disengage from aggression and violence, I think. But I'm a pacifist, so that's the way I think about it.
I think that these men that do this really do feel a tremendous amount of weakness inside, and a tremendous amount of insecurity and self-loathing, and they try to cover it up by being and dominating other people, which I studied yoga practice a lot in my life, and I really like it because it just teaches you to be where you're at. I mean, it actually encourages you to, embrace your weaknesses, and that your weaknesses really are your strengths. And it's about, integrating all of your parts, because we're taught to just be tough, put on some kind of false image that everything looks good, and then hide and not acknowledge all of the flaws or the sadness or the fear. And, I think yoga practice is a great way to, to just, tell the truth about what we feel. And, once you, and to do that with men, and to make it okay to feel all these feelings that men are taught that they can't feel, and all these feelings that men are taught that they can't show.
Right.
They
lose so much in the process. I mean, they're really enslaved by this hypermasculinity, and it's just, it just makes me feel bad for them and sad for them, because if they would allow themselves to be more sort of fully fledged as human beings, I think that they would feel at peace with themselves a lot more.
Exactly. There's a therapist. Her name is Nancy Napier. I've taken classes with her in the past, and she calls it. So like, instead of just having an on and off switch inside of us, that we have a dimmer switch. So you have more of a range of your emotions, other than just like on and off. Like a lot, I think of emotions, and I don't know if I said this to you when I spoke to you on the phone the first time, but just like our physical anatomy, and we have different muscles, different body parts that most of us don't even use. Emotionally, it's like the same thing. We have such an arrangement of emotions that most people never even get to be in touch with. We're allowed to only feel like a small part of ourselves. And I think of it like muscles, like people, men that are just encouraged to be angry all the time. So that muscle is getting worked and worked and worked and worked. So the more it gets worked, obviously, the more it's going to, kick in. It's like it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It just perpetuates itself. So, we have to exercise other parts of ourselves, to be proportioned, like to be more in balance than just.
Right. I think that's exactly right.
I have this weird image in my head of, because I used to be a big gym person, a personal training, and like I imagine, people going to the gym and just working out one body part every single time they went, whatever it was, like their triceps. I wrote a blog about this. Like how silly would that look if somebody just worked out their triceps every single time they went to the gym for like years? And that's on an emotional level, like the way people are when all they do is feel their anger or their sexuality or whatever, things that people over-identify themselves with.
Right.
I think
it's true, and that's actually a good analogy. And I know also, we talk about sort of the diminished options for men. There's diminished options for women too, because my daughter, I wanted to raise her to understand that when she's angry, that she has the right to articulate her anger, and that shouldn't make someone turn around and call her a bitch because she's angry. I mean, she's a human being, and she's going to feel anger from time to time, in the same way that my sons are going to feel sad from time to time.
Exactly.
And so I just want them to be as fully developed emotionally as they possibly can be, because I think it makes them able to, to sort of interact better with anyone and everyone that they come into contact with as they're more fully developed.
And the thing, too, is that women are normally encouraged to not be angry. I mean, I know that was true for me. I grew up with normal, healthy, rightful anger, and it's like I was made to feel like I was a criminal for being right and for just standing up for myself. Like I was a bad guy if I didn't like, being treated like shit in my house. And, and it wasn't, I won't, really get into it, but I went like my whole life, like afraid of my anger. I was so afraid, like if I felt, like even just assertion. And I gave too much and gave too much and gave too much in a lot of relationships. And, now that, it's coming out more and people are talking about things more, and what, I talk to people a lot, and even today, a lot of people, like they're always saying to me about, like being positive and, like there's this mentality about being happy and like we're supposed to feel good all the time. And, you know,
Right.
like as if there's some like taboo about just feeling what you feel. It's like, how about just feel what you feel, whatever it is, you know, anger,
Right.
sadness, hunger, thirst, you know, sexy, you know, traumatized, whatever it is, you know, happy, joy, feel it. Like just feel what your real feelings are instead of using your head. You know, I talk about this a lot when I blog, how we're conditioned to use our head to just manipulate the body and what we feel and to block what it feels rather than just letting the body go through and feel what it needs to feel to completion so that it's out of the body and it's done. It's all these incomplete feelings that are left over from when we were kids that we never got to feel. I think that carries into adulthood, and people are trying to get these healthy feelings out of their bodies, and they're trying to work it out in some completely unskilled way by you know beating someone up, or you know, I mean, it's Peter Levine talked a lot about that in his Waking the Tiger book about, you know, getting trauma out of the nervous system. You know, the mind and body disconnection is a huge part of all of this stuff.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you know, the mind, the masculine being, you know, seen as more valuable, which is dominating, you know, the body. So, right, like if we value the intellect, which is, you know, normally seen as the masculine, you know, dominating the body, and the emotions, which are normally seen as, you know, weak feminine things to be emotional. So that's the society that we've created.
Right.
Yeah,
and we're losing a lot in the process. You know, we're losing so much human potential in the process when we just get so boxed in and so frightened and so you know, strung out and addicted to power and control and I don't know, but over the years I've had the chance to work with a few men that have really said, you know, this is just not, it's not good for all of us. It's not good for me. It's not good for my wife and my kids. And they just, you know, they just understand that they don't want to be boxed in like that anymore.
Kit Gruelle, thank you very much. I look forward to having you on again and learning more about, you know, your teaching and this, you know, learning and the success stories of changing, you know, the way that we think in this country.
Well, it's all in the name of peace.
Amen. Thank you, Kit.
Thanks so much.
So that was Kit Gruelle. If anyone hasn't seen Private Violence yet, check it out. It's a real eye-opening experience, and it has a lot to teach us about the society that we live in. So we're going to take a break, and then we'll be back with Debra Sweet, who's going to talk about tomorrow. There's an event on drones here in the city, 40 East 35th Street at a church crossing Madison Avenue. And the Unmanned documentary, I believe. No, sorry, Wars in Waziristan. We're going to talk with Debra Sweet after the break. Thank you. Stay with us. So we are back with Debra Sweet, and we're going to be talking about Drones and Dirty Wars, Prelude to Drone Days of Action 2014, an event that's occurring here in New York City tomorrow at the Community Church at 40 East 35th Street. There's going to be a live webcast. It's going to be Ustreamed at Stop Motion Solo. 7 p.m., Community Church, 40 East 35th Street. What is that going to be featuring, Debra?
Well, thanks for that promo, Kat.
Sure.
Some people would say all wars are dirty, and that they have a point, but we're specifically talking about the development under the so-called war on terror of secret operations, targeted killing, indefinite detention, the way the United States has decided to pursue empire. And so tomorrow night we're having 3 really interesting speakers that together are going to provide sort of almost a training session for the hundreds of activists in the US and others around the world who are going to be spending from today, April 1st, 2014, through April and May of this year, really focusing on stopping the US drone wars and the surveillance by drone. This is something people can find out more at by going to knowdrones.org. That's KNOW drones.org. And also World Can't Wait, where we're holding forth on a whole bunch of crimes of our government and giving people sort of a deeper understanding of what's going on and challenging people to take action to stop it. And we also give people a lot of ways of going about that at worldcan'twait.org. And tomorrow night, the 3 people speaking are, first of all, Madiha Tahir, who is a journalist based at Columbia University in New York, who did a really interesting documentary film that debuted last year called Wounds of Waziristan.
Right, that's the one I was trying to think of. I think I said Wars of Waziristan.
Well, the wounds from the wars, and it features the people in that part of northwest Pakistan who have been so heavily targeted by the CIA program of targeted killing via drones. And we know through the work of the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, for instance, that probably 4,000 civilians have been killed. Hundreds of them are children. And she went there and she profiled some of the people who lost loved ones and family members to the U.S. drone war. And that's an extremely important thing that she did. You can find the whole film right now streaming at woundsofwaziristan.org. That's WAZIRISTAN.org. The second speaker is Maria LaHood, who's part of the legal team at the Center for Constitutional Rights here in New York as well. And she's been involved in the legal fight on the part of CCR over the U.S. justification of targeted killing. CCR went to court to try to stop the assassination by drone of several American citizens and many other people. So she'll be filling us in on what is wrong with the U.S. trying to legally justify drone war across national borders without any declaration of war. And the third person that's going to speak tomorrow night is Carl Dix, who's a revolutionary communist and also one of the people, the person who, along with Cornel West, founded the Stop Mass Incarceration Network. And he's going to be talking about, by invitation, on the parallels between how the U.S. targets people in the Middle East and how the government here domestically targets youth in the inner cities, mass incarceration, police brutality, and so forth.
This is a really good sort of second part to the first part of the show that I did. The first hour, we had Kit Gruelle, who is with the private violence documentary that was part of the Sundance Film Festival.
Great.
So it's, and I don't want to, start calling it like, male bashing or anything like that, because it's not male bashing. I mean, like, males are actually like being bashed themselves and being taught that to be a man, you have to, Kit called it hyper masculine, which is untrue, and that a real man actually does have, caring and compassion and nurturing, which is a healthy part of being a male. That so many, have been brainwashed to believe, women also, I'm a female, and I'm not even allowed to sometimes to be caring. I get bashed for being too sensitive all the time. So you said it's going to be a training for activists?
Well, that's how I'm looking at it. We've put together this live program in New York City, and then we thought, well, we shouldn't just keep it here. And I should mention, are going to be recording it, and
Yes.
people will be able to see it quickly on your YouTube channel.
Absolutely.
And World Can't Wait.
And my YouTube channel, for those who don't know, is April, like the month, Watters, Watters. So I was going to play a little bit of Wounds of Waziristan to give.
Oh, good.
It's. I hear an echo. I hear myself echoing. For those, it's in full there on YouTube for 58 minutes and 55 seconds for anybody who's interested. And there's also the documentary Unmanned about drones that I posted on my Facebook page if anybody wants to watch that. So here is Wounds of Waziristan. Sorry, I'm just gonna move it up a little.
1,800 homes in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. It's also reportedly planning to build a new separation wall along its border with Jordan. The move comes ahead of a visit by Secretary of State John Kerry to encourage U.S.-brokered peace talks. The pending Geneva peace conference.
Sorry, it says it on her website, but it doesn't bring you exactly to it. Mm-hmm. So this just might be, okay, wait, I think this might be it here.
He is with someone. He remembers his baby girl a lot. She was his love.
So the story isn't so much about the dead. It's the way they haunt the living. The way they linger. The way they hang on. The US began bombing Pakistan in 2004. Now it's 9 years later, and the American conversation on drone attacks is only just beginning. I've lived most of my life moving between America and Pakistan. One sees itself as the center of the world, and the other is on the margins. But Waziristan, where most of the drones attack, is at the margins of that margin. Like so many Americans and Pakistanis, I knew very little about the place. Waziristan is part of what's called the Federally Administered Tribal Areas, or FATA. It's in Pakistan, and it borders Afghanistan. And it has been bombed before, nearly 100 years ago by the British when they occupied India. The British used the tribal areas as a buffer zone. They bombed it to suppress rebellion. They called it air policing. They said there was no law here, so force was necessary.
I just wanted to read, it has something to read here. It says, in warfare against savage tribes who do not conform to codes of civilized warfare, aerial bombardment is not necessarily limited in its methods or objectives by rules agreed upon in international law.
Mm-hmm.
Waziristan is only a day's drive from the capital. The checkpoints dot the border. No one can go there independently. Pakistan's security forces have killed many people here. The insurgents have too. And now, the American drones are doing the killing. When it comes to language, nobody describes the insurgents or the Pakistani military's tactics as precise. But that very word, precise, is often thrown around in discussions about the American drone program. These attacks are described as neat, surgical tactics in precision-based warfare. They seem to suggest that killing can be like surgery. You can take out the bad without disturbing the good. No consequences for anyone. No sorrow. No loss. They promise a death that isn't a death at all. And that's why drones are becoming acceptable among Americans as a way to kill in Yemen, in Somalia, and in Pakistan.
Okay, I guess I'll pause it there. So I'm going to just correct myself. It's Wounds of Waziristan is not 58 minutes long. I think it's only actually about 20 or so minutes long.
Correct.
Yeah. So, right, the 58 minutes was the whole episode of Democracy Now!, which I do not want to play. So, the woman speaking was the woman that you just mentioned. Say her name again.
Madiha Tahir. Madiha Tahir.
And she is going to be there tomorrow speaking.
Yes. We're not going to show the film. We've showed it a number of times in New York, and people should really take the opportunity to look at it. I have found it a very good thing to show. It is only 20 minutes
right
long in classes, talking to students of all ages. It really, every time I show it, I get the reaction of young people crying, first of all, out of shock and anger and horror that this is going on and they didn't know it.
Exactly.
This is being done by the U.S. government with impunity because nobody is stopping it. Nobody is telling the U.S., you can't do that. This is exactly why we are doing this event tomorrow night and 2 months worth of protests. This is a huge country and there are hundreds of millions of people here, and there are probably, to be honest, thousands of people will participate in these protests led by hundreds. But this is an important starting point. It's very important that people see visible protest about what's going on, even if they don't know very much, because that is one way people are moved to learn more. And so we're going to different kinds of places. We're going to the military bases that are operating the drones from a distance, killing from halfway around the world.
And where is that? What states?
Well, today people were at Beale Air Force Base near the Bay Area in California, where surveillance drones are flown all over the Middle East. And out of Beale are the pilots who are sitting in consoles and controlling those drones wherever they're going. Here in New York, on April 27th, we will be protesting at Hancock Air Force Base, which is right outside of Syracuse in upstate New York, which bases the pilots that actually fly Reaper and Predator drones in Afghanistan, which have killed thousands of people, uncounted numbers of people, as part of the U.S. war on terror.
And say the name of that Air Force Base again, the one in Syracuse?
It's Hancock Air Force Base.
Okay.
All right. And on Sunday, April 27th, we'll be there. Cornel West is going to be speaking, and there'll be many of us having a march to the edge of the base where we often go to protest. And probably there will be more symbolic protests where people get arrested because they won't even let us stand on the edge of the base and make a political protest.
And how are you going to be getting there? Is there going to be like buses or anything like that?
Yes,
I would love to go to that.
Contact World Can't Wait, and we're organizing transportation.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be an event on Thursday also, isn't there, Debra?
Yeah, this Thursday is an interesting one. If people have heard of General David Petraeus,
that's right.
He rose through the ranks of the U.S. military, an Army general who got his medals and his first combat experience by leading battle in Iraq, and then was put in charge of the U.S. war in Iraq around the time that the surge started in 2005, 2006. This is when the casualties on both sides shot way up. Both the Iraqi casualties, which were huge and never counted by this government, and even the U.S. military casualties went up when Bush, because the war had been, from a military standpoint, for the Americans had been really a disaster, finally decided to send more troops in, and Petraeus was in charge. So he did that, and then he moved on to Afghanistan, where he led another surge in 2009 of more troops into Afghanistan. He went on to become the director of the CIA very briefly, but had to resign in disgrace. Not for the reasons he should have had, but because he got involved with a female reporter, and his wife found out about it, and he got in trouble for that, and not for the war crimes that he's responsible for.
Isn't that ridiculous? I mean, I don't. Yeah,
It's par for the course, isn't it?
And so he's
it's the way this society and this system does this. But now he's teaching at
right.
He's teaching at the City University of New York, and he's also teaching out at Stanford, or UCLA, and he's going around the country speaking to campuses as a warrior scholar. So we've had a lot of protest of his teaching in New York. Particularly last fall, he was teaching a seminar at the Honors College at CUNY. That's the City University of New York. And 6 students were arrested protesting in a really outrageous example of police repression last October. Lots has been going on, and we're holding sort of a public hearing Thursday night. That's April 3rd at the CUNY Graduate Center at 35th Street and 5th Avenue in New York, and people can find out more about that also at worldcan'twait.net.
And when was it that we were out protesting? The Historical Society was giving him some kind of an award that we were at protesting like some months ago. I have
in December. The New York Historical Society gave Petraeus an award for distinguished service, which was enough of an outrage. But yeah, we were out there. I think there were 75 of us out there screaming and yelling as all the people unloaded from their luxury SUVs and their furs and went in to salivate with the war criminal.
I actually tried to get inside that event. I mean, I almost did actually, but and then the guy who was running it, he ended up just telling me to email him, and that he would give me some photographs or some kind of press release about it, and I emailed him and I never heard anything. But I actually found my videos of that night with you in it. So I'll play this one.
ROTC, go away! Workers of CUNY shout! We want Petraeus out! Students of CUNY say! ROTC, go away! Workers of CUNY shout! We want Petraeus out! Students of CUNY say! ROTC, go away! Workers of CUNY shout! We want Petraeus out!
I'm just moving it up a little bit because, okay,
This protest is for Petraeus, who's getting some kind of a ridiculous award. He's getting an award from the New York Historical Society as a person of achievement. And what did he supposedly achieve, according to them? You know, he led U.S. forces in Iraq. He led U.S. forces in Afghanistan. He led the Central Command. He led the CIA. He's a major figure in U.S. imperialist policy and leadership over the last 15 years. And even before that, he has a very bloody history of being involved in El Salvador and other places where the U.S. was asserting its domination over small countries.
Wasn't he the one in the Dirty Wars documentary that was kind of overseeing the torture that was going on?
Yeah, he was involved in what happened in Abu Ghraib. He was in charge when there were secret special operation prisons in Iraq that still have never been fully accounted for. He was in charge of special operations. He's the architect of the surge in 2006 and 7, which killed hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq and led to this bloody increase in sectarian violence. He was the architect of night raids in Afghanistan that are still continuing. This is one of the reasons the U.S. can't even get its own lackey, President Hamid Karzai, to agree for them to stay longer, but because the U.S. won't give up on killing civilians in their homes at night.
And what is the point of that?
This is the point of projecting U.S. power all over the world. He became a master of it, and he was brought down for reasons we don't fully understand when he briefly led the CIA. But this has been a disaster, and to honor him in New York City, in the middle of the empire, is completely unacceptable.
And I know, we've discussed this over and over, this ridiculous idea that the troops are over there to be helping somehow over in the Middle East is completely absurd. That they're really over there to just gain control and take over.
Well, they're over there to assert U.S. domination in all of the Middle East, in particular, and really all over the world.
Okay, I'm just going to end it because the background noise. I mean, I could hear what you're saying like fairly well, but there's just the people in the background. It can be a little bit challenging, but unfortunately, it's hard to control things like that. And so that's going to be on Thursday. So what's going to be happening there, Debra, with Petraeus at the event?
We'll be there from 6 to 8 p.m. on Thursday, April 3rd. It's a public hearing. We have a couple of attorneys who are going to be the listeners and give opinions on what they hear. And I think there's 4 of us speaking. An attorney from the Center for Constitutional Rights will be speaking about legally what's the basis to say somebody is a war criminal? What actually are war crimes? And what has the U.S. done that constitutes a war crime? Particularly since the Bush regime began the so-called war on terror. An Iraq veteran is going to be there speaking, and I'm really hoping that he'll be able to bring out some more detail and what was going on when Petraeus was in charge of U.S. forces and the Central Command in Iraq and Afghanistan. And also there's a professor from CUNY that's going to go way back into Petraeus's role in El Salvador in the 80s and 90s before he became General Petraeus.
So too bad we couldn't get like a Michael Hastings or someone there, but I know it's like that's what happens when you start to, I mean, he was on to something. I mean, he said before he met, his demise.
Well, we don't know what happened with Michael Hastings, but he was a journalist who had written about Petraeus and also had written about Stanley McChrystal, who's the general that followed him in Afghanistan.
I read the operators, And it seemed, I mean, it was definitely focused much more on McChrystal than Petraeus. I don't know if there's maybe like another book that he talks about Petraeus more.
Well, he mainly wrote articles about Petraeus, but Petraeus was brought in to take over after McChrystal was fired for making not very smart, loose comments about Obama, and not very smart for his career, I mean.
Right.
McChrystal was a war criminal. He's really the architect of the night raids. And the night raids are such an important feature of Afghanistan that it is, as I was saying at that protest, it is one of the key reasons why Karzai has not signed an agreement for U.S. forces to stay, because they've killed so many Afghan civilians in their homes. This is no joke. We're not throwing around this term war criminal lightly because there's someone we don't like. We're actually describing someone who helped the U.S. be more efficient at carrying out war crimes.
You're not throwing it around as lightly as they're throwing the drones around.
Exactly. Yeah. Who really cares about human life?
I mean, isn't that weird? It's like you take more consideration in like who you call a war criminal than they do of who they drop drones on. So I think we're going to go to a break.
Well, I mean, we're not an empire.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, finish.
Okay.
And then we'll take a break.
I said we're not an empire. We are just people who care about humanity. They're the ones that are the biggest empire in the history of the world, with the largest military and the hugest economy based on exploitation that's ever existed on this planet. They're the ones that bear the responsibility for what's going on. Our responsibility is just to do all we can to stop them.
Oh, I have a question, but I'm going to hold it until after the break, and then I will ask you my question. Okay, we're back. We still have Debra Sweet with us of World Can't Wait organization. I was just going to take the next couple of minutes to play another video from that protesting against David Petraeus and being given an award from the New York Historical Society. And this is a video of just one of the protesters that was there, this teacher who was basically just expressing why she felt that it was important to protest David Petraeus receiving an award from the New York Historical Society. So why are you out here?
I'm a teacher, and I'm a teacher in CUNY. I'm supporter of the CUNY Internationalist Clubs. And what is happening this year is there's an attempt to rehabilitate Petraeus as a visiting professor at CUNY and as a noted member of the community.
Or does he need a new job or something?
Yes, they gave him a job as a visiting professor at CUNY.
What happened to his general status?
Well, he had to step down as general because of a scandal, if you remember what happened.
Oh, so they're trying to recycle him?
They're trying to recycle him. And meanwhile, he's responsible for the murder of millions of people around the world. And we don't think that he should be getting honors at any historical society because he's a war criminal. And we don't think he should be teaching at CUNY. And the protests at CUNY have already driven him off the campus. He has to teach in a building that has no name on it on the 40th floor because the students have come out and protest against him.
Does anybody show up to his? What is he teaching? What subject?
That's a really good question. Some kind of history or something, or warfare. But we say CUNY is not a war college. Yeah. We went him off now. So that's what we're about.
Thank you. You're welcome. Okay, so that was just the views of this teacher who showed up, who doesn't believe, obviously that Petraeus is deserving of this award. So the question that I had for you that I wanted to ask before the break was, David Petraeus, McChrystal, Obama. I mean, okay, let's just stick to David Petraeus. I mean, does he really believe that he's fighting terrorists, or, does he know that he's just doing these night raids and killing innocent people? I mean, do they really believe in this war? I mean, or are they just like making it up?
Well, does it make it better or worse if they do believe it or not? I mean, it's an interesting question. I don't know how we would know the answer to that.
I mean, it's kind of hard to believe, but it doesn't mean that it's not possible that they just know that. I mean, I think that they know that this war is illegitimate, and they're there for other reasons. Like they're keeping up some kind of a facade for a reason. I mean, like they know that they just want the people to think that they're there for, going after terrorists, but they know for a completely different reason. I mean, and maybe, well, they don't know. I mean,
since you're asking me my opinion, I think it's a mixture of cynicism and true believers. Yes, they really do believe they are fostering and acting in the interests of America. And to them, America might be all sorts of wonderful or cynical things, but they are sworn to uphold the interests of advancing what U.S. imperialism is doing. So whether they really believe it or they're cynical about it doesn't matter as much as what they're actually doing.
But he's got to know that he's killing innocent people. I mean, he knows he's not killing terrorists.
Well, I don't. Named a lot of innocent people terrorists. I mean, in the area of Waziristan, where Madiha did her documentary, and we heard some of this earlier, the U.S. government has a policy of designated all military-age males are by definition insurgents, unless it's found after the death that they weren't. So they go to great lengths to make people think that they are terrorists. Not only the people who are targeted, but the people that they want to support all of this, like all the people we know. So where does the reality and the myth end? Right. They have the news media, they have the educational system, they have the power superstructure in society to be able to say this is true.
Well,
and I think to a certain extent they do. That's their, they think that that's their truth, but it doesn't mean it's actually true.
Right. I mean, I encounter that same dynamic with people that I know, like right in front of, I mean, it just happened to me like pretty recently. If people are looking for something, chances are they're going to find it. I mean, I just, like, again, personally, I experienced that. It's like when people have an agenda, chances are they end up creating, that agenda. And it's really hard to get them to see otherwise. And I mean, this whole war thing and these drones, I mean, it just seems like momentum has taken over where it seems like pretty out of control. I mean, like they said in the Dirty Wars documentary that they just end up creating more, and they're calling them terrorists, but I don't call them terrorists when family members who just, innocent people who just saw their relatives being blown up at a wedding, want to retaliate against the United States. Like, I don't call someone like that a terrorist. I call that, kind of normal. That's a normal feeling. And so, I feel like it's really important about who we call terrorists. And so that's pretty much what I got out of watching Dirty Wars, was that they're creating terrorists. They're not killing them.
Mm-hmm. You know, well, this is what happens when an empire is expanding and, you know, doing all the things they could do to try to control these parts of the world and to develop a supportive social base here.
Because
and it doesn't mean they have complete freedom. And, you know, are they out of control in a certain sense? Yes, but they don't control all the factors. They don't control how people are going to respond to them.
Right. And I was going to say the drone pilot that was in the unmanned documentary. I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful if he could be at the event tomorrow on drones and dirty wars?
Well, we invited him. We invited him. He's going to be in Europe, but he'll come at some point soon.
Brandon, what's his name? Brandon
Bryant.
Right. Yeah, that would be, you know, because I thought it was really powerful to listen. I mean, you know, like I can't even imagine what it feels like to be him, knowing that you dropped, you know, bombs on completely innocent people. And he describes in the documentary, you know, from where he's sitting in Nevada or wherever it is, Arizona or somewhere in the West United States, Midwest United States, that he could see pretty graphically and clearly what's going on, like the damage that the drone is causing, that he actually watched a guy bleed to death. I mean, that's
yeah, it's completely chilling.
He's going to be scarred.
And this is why he left.
Yeah.
He left the military. He's been explaining to people, you know, just what kind of a number being in this situation does to your humanity, your psyche, your humanity, and everything else.
Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's all fake. Like this guy, you know, thank God eventually was able to see that it's just fake. And he had the strength to listen to his, you know, instincts that, I mean, you know, I couldn't, you know, imagine just, you know, just because someone says so, like some sergeant or whatever, like tells you to just blow up people that you don't even know, that never did anything to you. And you know, this guy is it's gonna be pretty rough. That's gotta be really rough.
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the collateral damage. Mainly it is in the bodies of the people targeted. You know, you think about there's 2 million people that served in Iraq and Afghanistan that are back in this country. A lot of them are really messed up mentally, not to mention physically.
Right. And also I wanted to say that, you know, you know, I mean, even in this country, it's like they just use that word terrorism and national security. If you see something, say something. And, you know, so like that's like they want to turn people into terrorists. They want to, like, they're going to take any false move that anybody makes, even in this country, because, you know, we're trying to fight the NDAA and for the military, the government to be able to, Obama, who's being sued over it, to just detain an American citizen. You know, they've killed American citizens. I mean, like, they just want to throw this word terrorists around, like, and use it as an excuse to just do whatever the hell they want. And, you know, they don't even have the right to be checking anybody's bags on the subway. That's the very thing that we should be protecting, not getting rid of. And, you know, they're throwing out the very thing that needs protection. And what do you have to say to that, Deb?
Well, I mean, they have state power, so they have the right because they have taken the right. They set up the borders. They set up the laws all to serve capital, to serve this particular economic system, and they've shaped the political system around. So you're saying they want to create terrorists. They want to name people as terrorists because it serves a particular political expedient, but they don't want those people fighting back. Don't. They do want a subservient globe that would be a lot easier to manage, but they're not going to get it in the way they're going about it. They probably never will, because there's always going to be some level of resistance to the harsh exploitation that most people in the globe are meeting from the United States and the Western governments. And that's why they have this huge military. That's why they're going to the dirty wars and the secret operations at this point. They don't have the freedom to occupy everywhere, but drones are getting much cheaper than fighter bombers.
Right. So, I mean,
it's a way of controlling things. The NSA is literally spying on billions of people.
Right, because they're preparing themselves for the descent. Right? And that's what
yes,
that's what you mean.
Exactly, to suppress it.
And right,
that's
so
what I mean.
And then they're going to be calling the dissenters terrorists. Like, how dare you not like that? I mean, it's just I don't know what it's going to take. I mean, like, what amount of people need to wake up to all of this stuff? Because I mean, these are like massive problems, and the people with the power, I mean, they have so much momentum. I mean, they are not going to go down easily at all. I mean, how are we going to take this down?
Well, they do have momentum and they have state power, but they don't have it unlimited freedom. And it's the very features of this dictatorship that they have that actually provide the basis for them to be gotten rid of as a class. I'm not talking about just individuals, but that's a whole other show, which we should do sometime soon. How are we going to do that?
What do you mean, how?
Very important. Well, you have a very oppressive system, and oppressive systems have fallen before.
Right.
So you're asking what would it take? First of all, it takes people understanding what's really going on. What's the nature of this system, and what is it doing, and why is it so bad, and how is it vulnerable? Take some analysis.
And it's people's tax money that's being used to pay for all of this stuff.
Well, taxes is kind of the least of it, actually. The massive criminal corporate enterprises don't pay that much tax. That's what
right.
People don't see. They think taxpayers. Well, everybody's a taxpayer. Everybody's paying sales tax.
Right.
That's true, but you're talking about massive war chests are largely bypassing taxes. So yes, it's screwing all of us that don't have a way of getting out of paying taxes.
Right.
That's true.
Right. And we're the ones getting screwed by what they do the most.
Mm-hmm.
So I will definitely be there tomorrow at 7 o'clock. I'm looking forward to it. It sounds like it's going to be really, really good. And I'll be there with my camera to film it. So it'll be
fodder future shows, I'm sure.
I'm sorry. Say that again, Deb.
I hope you get some good interviews. It'll be fodder for future shows, and I'm sure you'll get some good interviews from it.
Right. So exactly, if I can interview some people there, or get them to be on a future show even would be great.
Thanks a lot for having me on, and I hope people will tune in tomorrow night at scrollcan'twait.net.
that's worldcan'twait.net, because you were breaking up a little bit, so I just wanted to repeat it. But so I'll see you tomorrow.
Sorry.
Debra Sweet of World Can't Wait.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Great. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Deb. So I want to thank everyone who's listening. I hope there are a good number of people out there listening. There is so much work to be done. There is so many people that we need to stand up, get involved. I mean, it's, I know it's not easy to overcome that. There's nothing we can do. It's always been like this, but it's going to get worse if we don't. It's going to be so much worse. It's not going to just continue the way that it is. They will, they're knocking on your door, and hauling you off, or someone that because we can't wait for our rights and our freedoms to diminish any more than they already have. So with that, I thank you, and please tune in next Tuesday for Organic News.